Welcome to Y.B.G show. Today I'm your host, Yinka Bode George, and this is Debating with Me. And we have today Ben Adioba, and he's a community activist and a realtor. And we also have Quincy Ruben, and he's an entertainer as well. So we're going to be posing a few questions to these gentlemen today. And these questions are going to be, you can answer them as freely as you want to answer them. But I want to get your opinion and your views on what your take is. So the first question I have is, should it be illegal to marry more than one partner at the same time in Africa? So if you had to look at it as Africa in a whole, what would you say, really?
Well, we really have to know what premise we are standing on when we say, should it be illegal? Like,
Okay.
are we, on the premise of religion, or are we in the premise of, modern world? Why make it illegal? Personally, I wouldn't advise anybody to go into that realm, because I'm actually a product of a polygamous family.
Interesting.
I witness what it takes, and so I won't advise anybody. But if I may play the devil's advocate here, men are created to procreate. We have 15 million to 30 million sperm count. God made it that way, and from time immemorial, God has never said okay, you can be with more than one wife, or you can be. Even the first prophet, who is Moses, had extramarital affairs, right? So we tend to stay away or walk away from nature, and nowadays we're finding that divorce rate is actually going high. Yes, we've made it illegal to marry more than one wives. However, people who are in marriage are actually having extramarital, and that's because of the nature that it's in men. So playing the devil's advocate, to each his own.
Absolutely.
Okay, you legalize it, you still have the issues that is affecting the world right now.
Interesting. That's an interesting take on it. I do understand in terms of having affairs in marriages and having extra relationships as well as a natural situation, but I also do understand the ability of man to control and the ability of self-control. So if you do want something really and truly, that should not really be an excuse to say, because nature has granted me this permission to go ahead and procreate, I can then do that because nature has granted me. I would just say that in that perspective. But what would you say in answering that question? Do you think it should be illegal?
My opinion, I'm more neutral. However, if I have to take a stance, I'm going to lean more towards no. It should not be legalized. And I agree with both of what you're saying. I agree with both rationales. But speaking from a Christian standpoint, you ought not to have more than one wife. You're supposed to have one partner, right? And from a spiritual sense as well, your relationship, your physical relationship, sexually, is supposed to be not just with you, but you and God and your partners. You guys are one. So sharing that with multiple wives, how does that work, right? So that's my particular stance on it.
If I may come in here, because now we are in the spiritual premises.
Okay.
Where many men had many women. Talk about Moses with a Cushite woman. Talk about Jacob. Talk about Solomon talk about David, his father. Okay, so it has always been men having more women. And it was purposely because of procreation, like have dominion upon the earth and multiply and replenish the earth. That's spiritual premise. Now, God has never had any problem with it. Although it says that a man shall leave his woman and cling and become one, right? But at the same time, the rule that you're talking about was only given to bishop, and that was from Paul, that says that a bishop must only have one wife, to try and have one wife. To try, because he knows that it's not something that is easy. But now, modern world, we've made, like, we've modernized everything, and we are now making it illegal not to have more than one wife. However, this is still, like, going against our own nature, because blood is thicker than water. Look at the situation with Bill Clinton in an Oval Office, having extramarital sexual intercourse or sexual relations. So over time, we've actually tarnished, like, reputations of great men simply because of what man created. We made the law, not God. God gave us what he gave us, but we made the law. And I'm playing the devil's advocate here. Right. It's not something that I would want to have because I went through it. I went through, like, my father having 2 wives, and neither of them, like, were my mother. And I was an outcast in her house whereby peace and tranquility was absent, right? So I don't wish it on anybody, but still, we are still fighting against nature. When we say, should we legalize not having more than one wife, we are fighting against nature and the sexual drive of a man that can actually procreate 15 million people with one shot.
Absolutely. But you're also looking at, when you're looking at the world differently. Now, the world, we said, was flat when we, many years ago.
Yes.
And once we learn new things, that's when we start to change and we adapt for the better, and then we start to create better things. Now, if you're going back to this question, we're going back to this question and saying now, is it great on a behavioral standpoint of view? Does it affect the second individual that now doesn't know where he or she stands in what they believe should have been them and this other person? And then you wake up one morning and your husband decides, hey, I want to marry somebody else. Now, does that on a behavioral standpoint now change the person's behavior towards them? Like, are they now becoming somebody else in that kind of perspective? Like, I would want to have a nice person. I would always want to be a nice person. I wouldn't want to go ahead and, because the nature says that, we should go ahead and sleep with everything around, that I should go ahead and do it. Do you get what I'm saying?
And this is why I'm so neutral, because I'm agreeing with I'm agreeing with what you're both saying, right? But there's 2 things I believe in. Do unto others as you want done unto you. And we, as men, have a particular power, and that power, like having multiple wives, for instance, as you said, right? To be able to control that and conduct that and minimalize it to one person and channel all that energy and focus to one person, I think is exercising a great deal of power as a man, as opposed
Absolutely.
to spreading it with other women.
Because it's very easy, it's very simple, it's very there, it's very accessible, if you really do want it to be accessible. But at the same time as well, it's something that if you really don't want to do it, you will not do it. You will find a way around it. You will find something occupying your mind. You will find something that you do every day that would channel something else.
Discipline.
Exactly.
So let me, like, we're always going to have this moral dispute within ourselves. And I think what we're trying to do is like to change the norm, right? And it's like telling a fish that you can no longer swim. Now I want you to fly.
But is that
It's
really
like,
the norm, though?
well, okay, so why do we now have this sole responsibility to now want to correct or change it? Like if it's not the norm. For some, it's the norm. For some, the belief that based on traditional beliefs that yes, they have the right and the privilege to have more than one.
Absolutely.
So did my father. So for us now, in the Western world, modern views, what are we trying to correct? What are we trying to change? Are we trying to say that it is bad, or are we saying that okay, fight against your nature, and like because there will always be moral dispute. Apart from that, we have other issues that that we need to fight on, that we need to correct ourselves. Yes, it's something that has been on from time immemorial. Can this generation change it, or will it still be an issue in the future? In the Western world, yes, we've corrected that issue. We've legalized one man and one woman. However, has that solved the issue?
I don't think we have enough information yet. I think everything is always hearsay. Everything has been passed on through the years on what our great grandparents did. And some of them might have been great people. Some of them might have just had one wife and one husband or whatever it is, but we will never know.
To pitch into that, for our great grandparents, it worked out really perfect for them.
Because there was no distraction. So the second topic, do you believe that Africans adopt the Western culture when at the detriment of their beliefs when they do actually come here? Or even when they're over back in Africa?
Unconsciously, yes, I do, because simple example, when they're naming their children, when Africans come to the Western part of the world and they're bearing children, when they're naming their children, they first think to give them an English name and not give them their traditional name. And even when they're giving them both, they go by the English name. And so they're kind of selling themselves, because now you've written this on a birth certificate, and you're selling yourself to this idea, which is still stripping you of your identity. Right. So there's that. We can look at how we live day to day in the kitchen. Back home, where we usually eat with our hands, but here in the Western part of the world, spoon, fork, knife. Yes, our parents left Africa to come to the Western part of the world to live a better life, for more opportunity, but now it's as if we're slowly losing ourselves along the way. And that's only because we now have to opt into the customs of another country, right? However, thank God for parents who still hold on strong to their culture and to traditions and still instill it into their children. And fortunately for that, we're still able to carry out certain ideas, habits, ways of conducting ourselves in the house, and we bring it outside of the house. So, yeah.
So what would you say to that?
I guess the question really triggers within me that, okay, when I'm approached, I say I'm Nigerian, and you meet a Zimbabwean, like, what does it really mean? Like, we that lives in the diaspora, some of us still don't know what being a Nigerian is. We've been stripped of identity. We're watching televisions that promotes and fosters Western cultures, Western beliefs, and Western traditions, letting us know that yes, what you have been instilled on growing up is not, it's basically nothing. And what we are showing you is something. So we believe that yes, there is greener pastures. So we came here, and the very first thing you have to do is learn the culture. Simply because you have no identity for you, you have no identity. You've been stripped of subconsciously and consciously. You've been intentionally. You've been stripped of that identity. So now I'm being told the history of Canada. So now I'm Canadian, even though I still say that I'm Nigerian, but I actually behave like Canadians. I have Canadian values now. Now, if I go back to Nigeria, even my home brothers and my families cannot relate with me because I have a different mindset.
Aren't we just arguing and making conversation about something that is the inevitable? That's something that is driving towards a global citizenship. Now, what I mean by that is having a global culture whereby, just like Toronto, you have your neighbor is from Pakistan, your next door neighbor is from India, is from parts of different parts of Asia and China, and as well as you have, you know, the Nigerians, and you look to the left, you have the Jamaicans, and you look to, you know, you see all these different people living in the same neighborhood, in the same street. Now, you take that in and you say, how can I work well with these people? Or how can I interact with these different individuals? There is no possible way that I can learn every single person's culture and interact with them the same exact way. So I have to then say, you know what would be a nice standardized culture that everybody can now work together in, and it works for us. That is how you have, for example, Canada. Canada has that culture whereby you can go into any restaurant and feel comfortable because you're able to say, you know, everybody's now able to put together different things that work for everybody in some sort of way. But if you are going back to the country you're in and you're now changing your beliefs, but you're changing your beliefs towards things that don't work for your country. So, for example, you're going to decide to become a hip hop artist, right? In a country whereby you know people don't really listen to hip hop, as an example, not Nigeria, just saying, it wouldn't work for you. Do you get what I'm saying? You kind of have to understand where you are at in order for you to say, you know what, this is how I'm going to work with that. So you can go ahead and change it, as an example. But I feel like the adoption is great if you are going into a different place to live. If you're staying where you are and you're saying, you know what, I want to adopt the Western culture, if it works for you and where you are, good. But if it doesn't work for you where you are, then why do it? Why would I call my child? I mean, I don't mind calling my child any name. I should have any right to call my child any name. But if you go to, I have an example. If you go to church, right, and you're being introduced by your parents to another elder person, uncle, whoever it is, and you say your English name, they're gonna be like, what's your Yoruba name or what's your Igbo name? You know, it's that kind of thing whereby they're like, you know what, you should always be called by your traditional name and not by your English name, even though it's a westernized culture. But we're starting to now adopt it because I think when you really look into the future, there's no other way in terms of a global culture. I don't think necessarily Western culture is going to thrive for all through our years because you have so many people in China, as an example, and they're going to come here with all of their different culture and beliefs as well, and we're going to also look and say, hey, maybe this actually could work better.
I agree with what both of you are saying. Nigerians are, I was just focused on Nigerians. We tend to have a small voice, or we're more laid back with our culture, for the most part anyways, in the Western society. There has to be, I guess you could say, a rebirth in a sense, and rebuilding to refine ourselves and to have that voice, you know, and speak up and say, hey, this is who we are. It's good to adapt. It's good to understand and learn, because we have to coexist with other people, right? The world is not Nigeria.
Absolutely.
Right? But we have to understand where we come from, and we can't lose sight of that along the way of wherever it is that we're going. So there's just has to be that reconnection of the bridge.
All right, so that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Ben, and thank you so much, Quincy. And we really, really love to have conversations like this. In reality, the focus is really to drive the fact that we are Nigerians and we are going to want to have our voices heard. And in reality of it is to push out the education and to push out the reasoning behind all of these different types of conversations that we're having, and to push it out there with minds that are great, like, you know, Ben here and Quincy. It's been an awesome time with you guys, and join us again next time.